Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. We're interviewing a sports nutritionist. His name is Adam Ross. He's a registered dietitian. He's also certified with the sports nutrition from International Society of Sports Nutrition, and he is currently, I think you still are, right? The campus dietitian for St. John's University in Queens, New York?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Cool, man. So welcome, man. So I met you through another seminar that was for sleep and recovery. I thought what you were saying was beneficial to hopefully for my audience. And that's why we're here, man.
Great.
So,
yeah. Happy to be here.
Pleasure, brother. So one of the main things I kind of want to talk about, because a couple of days ago, I spoke with a functional doctor that his concentration was on nutrition. So he was very scientific based.
Right.
So I kind of want to take some of the stuff that he had, but make it a little bit more practical.
Okay.
Because I feel like the science stuff is good for people that know a little bit about it, but for those that don't, like it could kind of go over their heads. And I want you to kind of hopefully come up with like some type of like foundational framework where the average jiu-jitsu practitioner up to like the jiu-jitsu athlete can have some type of a framework to kind of build on their own program.
Right.
So first and primary question is, what do you think the difference is between the jiu-jitsu sport and diet compared to the normal individual?
Well, I think, the needs obviously of any athlete, they're so much greater than, your average person who's just kind of, walking around, not doing a ton of activity. Obviously, being a combat sport, jiu-jitsu, I mean, then you get into kind of a whole nother realm, right, where there is, injuries and bumps and bruises and, especially, shoulders and ankles and knees and everything getting torqued on so hard consistently. Then you get into that whole inflammation aspect and recoverability and your ability to heal from these things is, even if it's not, I'm sure, you obviously have more experience in the jiu-jitsu field than I do, but I'm sure like if at any time you're actively like practicing, and especially if you're competing, you've got to have constant injuries that you're just battling through. And, I think it's kind of just comes with the sport. Right. So I think, obviously there is like the general athlete aspect where obviously your needs for nutrition are greater than the average person. And then you act like just start including the fact that you got a lot of, injuries and bumps and bruises and stuff to recover from. And then it really becomes important.
Okay. So obviously inflammation is a big factor. So what could a person do to kind of food wise to kind of mitigate some of that inflammation? Because for us, inflammation is just it's almost like it's mandatory. It's almost like one of the things that you do on a daily basis. No matter how good of a jiu-jitsu practitioner you are, you're gonna strain something at some point or another. It may not necessarily be like injured, but you're straining it, putting a lot of pressure on it. So there is always going to be some type of healing process, not just muscularly, but also at the joint level. And a lot of that healing process is inflammation based. So not only, actually externally doing what you can to help that injury heal, but what could you do food wise that could kind of also speed up that process as well?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, internally, the one thing I always tell people, it almost seems like it's too easy, but just focusing on nutrient quality of your foods, right? So we kind of get into that whole, nutrient density. So being plant-based foods are going to be your highest nutrient density as opposed to calorie dense foods, right? So I always just tell people like the more colors, right? So fruits, vegetables, dark greens, especially when it comes to antioxidants and anti-inflammatory things like oranges, purples, reds, things like that. So I think that's like the first one that I would attack, and it's the easiest one, right? Because that's literally just just cleaning up your diet and just focusing it on a lot of good healthy, eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, getting in good healthy carbohydrates. Being complex version, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, quinoa, lentils, beans, things like that. those are all going to have so many like nutritional aspects of them that are going to help you recover from not only injury, but like just everything you're doing throughout the day. And then omega-3s are another big one, right? So omega-3s are going to be found like mainly, best in fatty fish, salmon, things like that. You can get them from walnuts as well. And the one thing, I think that's one of those things a lot of people are probably on the edge of being deficient on. So I always recommend probably a good fish oil supplement. Omega-3 fish oil supplement would be really good as well. And then just making sure you get your antioxidants in, right? So again, that's going to be, citrus fruits, and then again, anything orange. So we're getting into like carotens, so sweet potatoes, carrots, things like that. Those are going to have a lot of vitamin C in them. And then those are going to, antioxidants are obviously going to help wash away some of that oxidative stress that you accumulate through, a combat sport, and that can help you recover as well.
So what's your view, what's your view on carbohydrates? Because there's like a little bit of somewhat of a catch-22 when it comes to like jiu-jitsu, because I don't know if you've noticed, but like in order for you to be able to, because of the type of activity, because of the fact that it's a high intensity anaerobic conditioning program when you're actually training, the average jiu-jitsu person at the high level, as well as like MMA guys, they have a tendency to be a little bit on the, I wouldn't necessarily say fat, but they hold a little bit, their body fat percentage is a little bit higher than someone that is just, like a bodybuilder or somebody that just goes to the gym day to day. And yep. I'm assuming not only is because of the activity, but it's also because of the food intake that they have to consume in order for them to maintain that activity at a high level. So, you hear a lot of the mainstream stuff is like, cut carbohydrates and so forth and so on in order for you to shed off weight. But then I've personally experienced it, and I've heard it from other, both male and female jiu-jitsu practitioners, that they do better if their carbohydrates are higher than normal. Yep. Because otherwise they're mentally a little bit on the slow side. Yep. And jiu-jitsu is also a cerebral sport as well. It's not just, repetitive motion. There's a thought process of how many moves you got to think ahead.
Yeah, extremely tactical for sure. Yeah,
100% tactical. So it's one of those things where it's like I kind of want to break that stigma that carbohydrates are kind of bad, because they're not. Yeah. And especially if you do jiu-jitsu. So what would you recommend, or what could you kind of teach my audience to say, okay, this is what you should do, approach carbohydrates?
Right. Yeah. So if you don't mind too, I kind of want to key in on like the first thing you said, because that's one thing I have like a great article about it, written by Sean Light. He's a ex strength coach of the LA Lakers, and he's just a super insightful guy. And I was reading an article that he put out the other day, and that's exactly what it is, right? Is body composition related to athletics, right? And I think we've kind of like gone down this tunnel of like thinking that, the most ripped guy, 5% body fat, that's what an athlete looks like, and there's definitely those people out there, right? There's always going to be those people that they hold a lower body fat than others. And, it's just kind of the way their makeup is. But like you said, if you look at a lot of these top like MMA guys, guys and girls, MMA athletes, a lot of just any pro athlete you look at, the majority of them are going to be probably up around that, like, in the 10, 15% body fat range. And that's for a reason, because that it actually like, it may not look it, but that's kind of like the body of like performance, right? Because at that point you have a little extra energy, obviously stored energy, right? As fat, and then you have that ability, like that recoverability. You got a little bit of cushion on the body, cushion on the organs, especially for like a fight sport, right? And you have a little bit of extra weight behind you, just in terms of like building extra strength and things like that, right? So, I mean, everybody has this opinion or this outlook that they need to be 5% body fat, but if you actually look at like what a bodybuilder has to do to get down to that body fat percentage, it's actually super detrimental to any bit of performance you could ever want, right? At that point, you're going purely aesthetically, right? Like at that point, you're not going to be carrying a whole lot of extra body water, so you can run into some hydration issues and stuff, especially when we're talking about mental aspect of things. That's a big one. And then, I mean, just your strength, right? Your recoverability, all these things diminish as you diminish your body fat, right? So I think that's an important thing for people to understand, is that I think it's important to like take an actual look at like, what does like my sport require, and like where am I at my best? Like I'm one of those guys. I've been focused on I was a professional hockey player, and I got focused on body composition too much, and by the end of it, my body was beat down. I was tired. I couldn't recover from stuff. I was getting random injuries and aches and pains and stuff that I couldn't get rid of, and I couldn't figure it out, right? And then obviously if I would have known then what I knew now, I mean, I could have done things a lot differently. The whole shoulda, woulda, coulda thing, right? But I mean, really, man, like I think it's very important that as athletes, we don't get caught up on appearance, and we do remember that performance is our number one focus, right? So, a guy may perform his best at an 8%, and some may perform their best at a 12, 13, 14%, right? And that's not to say that anyone's better than anyone else, but I mean, if we're talking, you got to worry about what's best for you, right? And if you want to be an athlete, a legitimate athlete, like you can't chase body composition as much as you need to chase performance. So that's,
and I've always had that mentality. It's do what's healthy, and whatever that looks like is the best way to go.
Absolutely.
So if you're getting maximum performance on this type of regimen of diet and this type of consistent exercise regimen, whatever that looks like, and stick to that. It doesn't matter what it looks like in the mirror, because over time your body is going to adjust to that regimen. The feeling good is where you want to go, and then the side effect is the looking good, and you got to just accept whatever your body kind of looks at. Especially for I would think, especially for the women athletes, and the women jiu-jitsu players, because I feel like it's getting a little bit better. I feel like society puts a lot of pressure on women as a whole, as females, to look a particular way. And if you're doing a sport like jiu-jitsu, it's a hard workout. Especially if you're doing it quite consistently. So it could be discouraging I would feel like, for the average woman to say, okay, I lost a little bit of weight at the very beginning of my jiu-jitsu program, but now I'm kind of plateaued out, and I'm not happy with the way I'm looking, even though I'm training quite a bit. And then they're starving themselves or trimming their diet so much to try to match what they believe that they should look like in comparison to what is optimal for their activity that they're doing. So it's like one of those things, is why I asked about the carbohydrate thing, because I get it a lot from women, more from women than I do from men, where they kind of say, what should I be eating, and what kind of carbohydrates should I be eating, and how much should I be eating? And it's one of those things where I kind of feel like someone like you can kind of drill it into their mind, where it says, carbohydrates aren't bad for you. And if you're doing it for an activity that demands more of those carbohydrates, forget about what you look like, especially for the women, and just focus on the outcome of performance, and your body will adjust to whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, that's another thing, is definitely the carbohydrates is something a lot of people, don't want to say, some people fear it. Some people are just, overly aware of it, whatever it is. But no, I mean, in terms of performance and recovery and stuff, like carbohydrate is your body's number one source of fuel, right? So, I mean, especially for like repeated high intensity activities and stuff like that, where your heart rate is generally up, for longer extended periods of time. That's when your body's going to be kind of seeking out that glycogen and that carbohydrate for energy, right? So, in terms of like, body composition and things like that related to carbohydrates, I mean, I think that's the thing, is that people have this, it's a false opinion that carbs make you gain weight. It's not. It's calories in general. So, I mean, as long as your calories are at a specific range, you're not gonna, if you eat, say 1,500 calories a day, doesn't matter how you spread that out really over the course of your day. it's going to be the same amount of calories at the end of the day. It's just how you distribute them that's going to determine the amount of energy you have to burn during specific times, right? So, you know, fats are generally going to be those slower types of fuels for more like aerobic kind of, you know, slower, steadier kind of exercise. But carbohydrates are that number one source when kind of the going gets a little tougher and the body's got to react quickly. And if you're short on stores, you're just going to power out quicker, you know. Especially, you know, with all like the grappling and everything that you guys are doing in the jiu-jitsu world, like that takes, and I've done it a few times, and let me tell you, man, it's a hell of a workout. It's crazy. It caught me off guard the first time I did it. It was nuts, but I mean, that's the thing, right? Like you need that repeatability, right? Those repeat bouts of high intensity, you know, where you go through a little point where you get a second to rest, and then you got to get right back into all out high intensity work. So I think that, you know, obviously carbohydrates are your fuel for that. So it's super important that athletes get enough, right? And the actual, I guess, recommendation you would call it, that's set by, you know, number of different organizations is like anywhere between 4 and 10 grams per kilogram, right? So I always use myself as an example just because I'm a 220 pound guy. So I'm exactly 100 kilograms. It just works out well. I mean, so for me as an athlete, the low end I would ever want to go recommended by these organizations is 400 grams of carbs a day, which sounds like an insane amount. But I mean, really at the peak of like, you know, competition where you're training, especially if you're training, numerous times a day, say you're training twice a day or something and things are getting pretty intense, like you're going to want to probably be double that. So, you know, for a guy like myself, that might even be up to like 800 grams. And it sounds like a lot, but I mean, you can't, you know, science has proven it, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to go against it. It's kind of is what it is. So, in terms of looking a certain way and stuff, why people have a harder time, you know, they say like, oh, well, carbs make me puffy or make me feel fat or whatever. You'll hold a little more body water, right? So glycogen, like your storage form of energy, comes from carbohydrate. It stores water also, right? So you'll have a little bit of extra water and stuff stored in your muscles, which again is just going to drive a greater performance. So that may be one of those things where you're looking at yourself and being like, oh, I don't look as slim and trim or something on days when I eat, or, you know, if I eat extra carbohydrates for a week. And that may be something as simple as just some added water weight, which is, like I said, it's just going to improve your performance. And that's super simple. You know, if you're maybe in your off season or something and you do cut back your carbohydrate, that's very easy to get rid of because it's just water weight, you know? So it kind of comes twofold. I mean, you get the extra energy, you get the extra water in the cells and in the muscles. But that's kind of, I think, where people get caught up on it. But again, I think if performance is in mind, you have to be able to be okay with, you know, running like just the effects of that.
So that's a good guideline to have, because when it comes to the jiu-jitsu community, it's a highly addictive sport. The
Mm-hmm.
people that get into it get quite a bit into it. So there's two type of people that do jiu-jitsu. There's not necessarily the weekend warrior, but the part-time sport, where, you know, 2 to 4 times a week.
Yep.
And, you know, their wife, husband, kids, family, job, and then they go to the sport. And then there's the actual athlete that is doing 6-7 days a week. Most of them do 2 a days, and in combination with teaching jiu-jitsu. But basically they're around jiu-jitsu like 4 to 8 hours on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
And the ones that compete also travel, which
Yes,
is that's another big whammy. So from what I'm hearing from what you're saying is, I think the best plan of action, especially if you plan on doing jiu-jitsu, is to come up with some type of consistent plan that you can follow on a weekly basis. Because especially if you're married or have kids or whatever it may be, if you don't plan your food out throughout the week, you're not going to be able to get the proper amount of calories, get the proper amount of nutrition, and then not recover quite as fast. And then that increases your risk, like you were talking about earlier, that happened to you. You increase your risk of injury. It takes you longer to recover. If you're a little bit older like me, it takes even longer to recover.
Yeah.
So those are things that kind of there. And for the athlete as well, because one of the things that I feel like with the athlete and I see that a lot, is they kind of yo-yo themselves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're prepping for a fight that they might get paid at, like a big event, they're very strict on their diet, and they're depleting themselves down to get to that whatever weight that they want to get to. And then when they get off of it, they have a tendency to go like the 180 opposite direction, where they're eating everything in sight.
Right.
Which their body can somewhat take it for two reasons. I think one, because of the amount of activity that they're doing. Two, because usually that high level athlete is usually on the younger side as well. Right. So we're talking like a 19 to 25-year-old. Your body can take that nutritional abuse from going from one to the other.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend for both like the average individual to do, and then for like the athlete to do, like approach of like how to eat on a weekly basis?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I guess the approach, I don't think is really any different. Obviously an athlete may have to worry about meal timing a little more because they're probably training more than once a day. So, the timing of meals may become a little more important there. And then obviously the calorie intake is going to become a little bit greater, right? So you're going to have to place more of a focus on eating, because it just gets tough, right? Your schedule is busy, you're highly active, got to make sure you're refueling, replenishing everything. But even just, weekend warrior type, or just your average, person who's just into it, they're doing it, say 5 days a week or whatever, while going to work and things like that. Again, I think to be successful with any diet, it just has to be something, like you said, that there's got to be some thought that's put into it. And then it's got to be something that's sustainable, right? So like you talk about these guys, they do things that aren't sustainable in order to, get themselves ready for a specific fight or whatever it may be. But I always just wish people would find a little less extreme and more sustainable way to do these certain things. So that's kind of the thing I push with everybody, is just like creating healthy habits that are like, they have to be for you though. They can't be, like I was, if you don't cook or something, don't all of a sudden think you're going to become a gourmet chef and meal prep for yourself 7 days a week and do all these great things. Like, just accept the fact, like, all right, I don't cook, so I need to figure out a way to make this work for me, right? So whether that's making a list of the 4 or 5 delis that are on your route back and forth to work in the gym every day, find a few good restaurants, whatever it is that you can pop into, that you can get a good like, vegetable, good lean protein, and a good carbohydrate, things like that. So I always tell people too, like, just don't go like so far outside your comfort zone thinking you're going to like do these amazing things, when like in reality, people are really going to probably take the path of least resistance, right? So I think that's a big one. And then, so that's kind of where the planning comes in, right? So, if it is like, I always just tell people, like, find a good system, right? So whether that's like you wake up, you got 20 minutes in the morning, you make breakfast. While you're making breakfast, you prep that day's lunch, and then you figure out something for dinner or whatever it is. Or just planning, having snacks or things with you. Or like I said, exactly where you need to stop each day, depending on your schedule, to get the snacks or whatever it is that you need. I think can go a long way, right? Because I think where we run into issues is when we just wing it. It's just like anything, right? Like, you're not going to go into a fight in jiu-jitsu without some kind of a game plan, right? Or else you probably end up getting your ass kicked. And it's kind of the same in the nutrition world, right? Like, if you just kind of mindlessly go about every day without a plan and just think, oh, I'll just stop in whenever I'm hungry, I'll just see what I see and I'll grab something, again, you kind of end up getting your ass kicked in that aspect as well. So I think planning is the number one thing that people just need to do a little bit better job of. And then again, it's just being realistic with yourself about your strengths and your weaknesses, and then just finding ways to, cater to both.
Yeah, and I agree with you 1,000%. I think a lot of people's issue is that they try to conform to some type of meal plan or some type of regimen that they can't sustain. So I usually tell everybody, it's like, try a few different things. Definitely. And see what feels good and see what you can actually stick to, because it doesn't really matter what you do to some aspect. Not, of course it does matter, but as long as you're health conscious in mind and it's something that you can stick to. It's like, goes back to I was reading the book by James Clear, The Atomic Habits, and he talks about one of those. Yeah, it's a great book.
One of my favorites, man.
Yeah. He talks about, like, you want to, like, for things that you don't want as a bad habit, make it disappear. You know, like make some friction to get it. Like if, you know, like for me, like my vice is I like salt, so I like chips. So I had to find like a workaround. I'm not gonna like deprive myself, but I also can't eat a bag of Doritos. So there was a couple of things that I do for me personally. I would buy like the little Lunchable little box that came with the little tiny little individuals, so that I would psychologically get that dopamine dump in my brain that I got to fix, but then I wouldn't eat a bag. And then times where I'd be like, oh, I don't really need that, but I want the actual chewing of it. Then I started eating popcorn because popcorn is a better option. So you have to kind of be like, figure out what works for yourself and then try to work it into your day-to-day, week-to-week, and year-to-year program. And then every once in a while, I think, is to have something a little bit more like discipline. Once you have like regular habits, then go, okay, well, I have this goal in mind, and this is how I can kind of trim it down just an extra 10% to give myself, my body, that additional push.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
But going back to what you were saying with athletes, my biggest thing with because I wrestled too when I was in high school and a little bit in college, is cutting weight. I have an issue with it. Like I think it's horrible. It's just, I get the original in combat sports. I get why there is like different weight classes, because it does make a difference. But man, it's just, in my mind, I just think it's catastrophic for your body.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy too, because there's always the horror stories, right, about things go wrong, and you know, I mean, I think I mean, in terms of creating eating disorders or disordered eating, I think that's a major player, right, where we have to do these drastic, crazy, extreme things. And then also, like you said, like the majority of people that are in these sports are generally a little bit younger in age, right? So you're talking high school. So you start putting that on like a 16-year-old kid, like, hey, you got to drop 10 pounds in, you know, a week, whatever it might be, right? I mean, they're not educated enough to do it properly. So that's where like the risk comes in, right? So, I mean, in terms of like the weight cutting, yeah, like it's one of those things where, I mean, like I said, I don't come from that fight sport background, so I'm not, you know, I don't maybe understand it perfectly, but, you know, fighting in a weight class a little bit closer to your natural weight, you know, it just seems like that would be a smart solution. And then making sure that you don't have to get into like drastic measures, right? So not waiting till 5 days before and having to try to cut 10, 12 pounds in 5 days. I think, you know, kind of doing like a bit more of like a taper effect where you, again, and this comes into planning, right? Rather than like, oh God, I got to fight next week and I weigh this amount and I got to be 10 pounds lighter. It's like, you know, starting to plan a month early and being like, okay, you know, I know that I'm at 175 right now. I have to fight at 165. I now have 4 weeks to do this. That gives me, you know, two-ish pounds a week or whatever. And then if I have to do something in terms of like a little bit of dehydration on the last couple days before, then it is what it is. But I think, you know, working with somebody to get a little bit more of a plan that can just help you do that in a less drastic way would be very beneficial to the whole body, right? Because it's just a complete, like, it's just not healthy for the body, right? Like to go through these drastic ups and downs and huge weight loss. And then, you know, I mean, you see like I guess biographies or whatever, the way some of these MMA athletes do it, and they put themselves through absolute torture for 2 to 3 days before the weigh-in. You know, they can't even get out of the hotel room hardly to get down to the weigh-in. They had people holding them up in the elevator and stuff. It's really kind of sad to see, right? And they're completely dehydrating their bodies of all water, any fluids. But then you figure they have to turn around and fight the next night. So then you go from one extreme straight back to the next extreme, like you kind of said at the beginning there, right? Of like, okay, now I have to rehydrate. I got to put some weight back on. I somehow, after completely destroying my body for 3 to 5 days, I have to fight, you know, in 24 hours. And it just seems, I just can't imagine that, like, I mean, there's no way you're at your peak physical performance when you're fighting 24 hours after you just had to get carried down to your weigh-in, you know? So I don't know, for me, I just think that just being a little bit smarter about planning and not having to do it in such a drastic way could make, it would be a world of difference, for a fighter going into their actual event.
Yeah, and luckily, jiu-jitsu is not like MMA. Jiu-jitsu,
Right.
you have to weigh in like right before you. Most organizations, you have to weigh in like right before you fight, because that 24 hours, that's what ends up happening. Everybody does like that extreme cut to be able to bounce back within the 24 hours. Where at least in the jiu-jitsu realm, strictly jiu-jitsu, you usually most of the competitions, you have to weigh in literally right before you compete. Then it goes back to the planning, like you said, because jiu-jitsu doesn't have a season. There's no
Right.
season. So it's technically year round. And I was talking to an athletic trainer a few days ago, and he was basically saying that the best way to approach the strength training aspect of it is to pick your battles, pick which competitions you're going to do. And then those are the ones that you're concentrating on. Those are the deadlines for your strength regimen. And I'm assuming you're going to do the same thing for your diet regimen, because
Definitely.
you can't maintain a trim diet year round. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, and also I just think performance-wise, you wouldn't want to, right? Like I get exactly where the strength coach is coming from, because you want to kind of periodize things, right? Like you have to have a time where you're working on, more general strength, and then the closer you get to competition time, you specify it more towards sport and away from actual strength and that sort of thing, right? And then obviously your conditioning is gonna be dependent on fight date and things like that. So yeah, again, nutrition would be the same thing, right? So it would be one of those things where it's like, okay, I know that I have 2 months of, say, my GPP phase where I'm just going to work on getting strong, getting in good shape, getting my weight back up, right? And then as time goes on, the closer you get to the fight, obviously, then the more, and like you said, like you would start to get a little more regimented with the diet. You would start to get on a little bit of a smarter plan, something that's really kind of catered toward the exact goal you're trying to make. But I definitely think that, yeah, in terms of performance, like choosing dates and almost kind of periodizing your training and your eating toward those off periods and on periods would be super beneficial, rather than just trying to be lean all the time, because you would kind of just be spinning your wheels in terms of training. I think you're not going to get a lot stronger, you're not going to get a lot faster, more explosive and stuff, without the caloric intake to promote that, right? So
Yeah, and I'm also noticing too, and I don't know why that is, I'm noticing that the guys that are really super high level black belts, you see them from when they started their career to where they're at now, and they've been slowly like growing in weight. So they'll start at like say 170, and now they're like 210. And it's not something that I don't think that they did it like for that particular purpose. It's just what felt right. In other words, as they grew in the sport, obviously they probably grew muscle, they grew conditioning, their body adjusted, their food had to adjust. So for anybody that's watching that, that's on the younger side, just keep in mind that most likely you're going to end up doing like minor changes where you're going to increase in size, because you are getting stronger. If you're
absolutely.
doing jiu-jitsu on a consistent basis, where you are when you're 17 compared to where you are when you're 25, your muscle density is just going to be different. So therefore your calorie intake is going to be requirement is going to be different. So don't be so like, you got to kind of plan that you're most likely going to get stronger, and you're most likely going to need to increase your calories, which goes back to what you were saying, is why you kind of need the do periodization. You need to kind of fluctuate a little bit to see where that range is that feels right for you and your body. One thing that's gotten really popular that a lot of the jiu-jitsu, I even do it a little bit myself, is intermittent fasting. But I had to change mine because I'm also a personal trainer. So my days are really, really long sometimes, where I'm working at 6 a.m, and sometimes I'm not getting home till like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so what was happening is that I didn't do my first training session of jiu-jitsu until like 11:30, 12. So I was waiting until about 1 or 2 to have my first meal right after jiu-jitsu. And then I would have my last meal like at around 8 o'clock, because I knew I'd be up until like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. The problem is that it was good at the very beginning. It felt good. It felt like my mind was good. I felt light. I wouldn't necessarily felt lighter, but I think it was just in my mind, I felt lighter. But by like week 2 or 3, I started feeling the reverse of it. What ended up happening is maybe I was getting stronger, and all of a sudden my body didn't have that fuel to kick on. And then I started feeling like garbage. I started feeling just like trash, that I had to be like, yo, there's something different, that I had to switch it. Then I basically had like a light meal. I had like a shake, like right before I trained, because when you eat a full meal, when you train jiu-jitsu, you feel lethargic almost. So I had to kind of change it, and it was a big difference. It was a huge difference. So like, even though intermittent fasting, they tell you to kind of do that, I feel like you have to be kind of cautious, but I don't know. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, man, I think you hit it right on the head. And that's like one of the things I always touch on with people is like all these diets, like, I mean, they're, like they're all great if they work for you, they're all great until they don't work anymore or whatever. Right. So it's like, I mean, I do like fasting. I do it fairly often as well. But I think that, like, exactly like you said, is you can't be like too stubborn or too like married to one idea to, I guess not realize when it's not working anymore. Right. So like you said, like you did it for a few weeks, you felt great. I mean, there are some really good benefits to fasting. So I will say, I think having like a timed feeding window is good. Like just for most people, especially, athletes, I would say no, because, you're generally just so active that if you're fasting, if you're giving yourself an 8-hour eating window, there's no way you're going to be able to get in 4,000 calories a day, and that's kind of what a lot of athletes are going to need to take in. So again, it has to fit like that, right? So if you somehow are going to cram 4,000 calories into 8 hours eating window and you want to do fasting, then it might work for you. But for the most part, you're going to need that extra time to get those extra calories in, so you don't just feel disgusting all day. For your average Joe, just whatever weekend warrior athlete, fasting can be pretty beneficial in terms of like insulin sensitivity and decreasing blood pressure and things like that. So there are some health benefits that they've found with it. And the other thing too is understanding like actual physical hunger cues, I think is a cool thing that it can teach you as well, right? Because I think there's so many of us, especially I talk to a lot of people, you just have this beat into your head from the time you're born, right? Your mom and dad are always like, oh, breakfast is the most important of the day. You got to eat all your meals. You got to eat at 8, noon, and 5, and you got to have snacks at 11 and, 3 and a bedtime snack. And that's where we get into this problem of like overeating, I think, as a society. It's just kind of been kind of scheduled, programmed into our body from a very young age that this is the way it needs to be, right? Where, taking some time to like let your gut rest a little bit, let yourself digest your food, realize that if you go till noon one day without eating, you're not going to fizzle up and die. You know what I mean? You're going to be just fine. You're going to feel fine. You're going to have energy. So I think those are some really great aspects of it, but again, it's not for everybody, right? So like, if you're one of those people who like, you just can't wait. You're just watching the clock until noon. And then at noon, you're just going off the rails and just eating 2 meals worth of food anyway. And then feeling terrible afterward, fasting is probably not for you at that point. So I think it's just important to be like realistic about it, right? So for athletes, I don't know if it is the best idea, just because also you want to stay in like that anabolic, like, building, recovering phase, right? So to go say 12, 14 hours without eating could actually be detrimental to like your body's ability to recover itself. And then if I'm just thinking, especially anybody who's taking it real seriously, any kind of professional athlete or someone who's trying to make it a profession, you're generally training first like early in the morning and then maybe again in the afternoon or something like that. Or for like a guy like yourself who's just super active throughout the day, like you said, you might feel great for a few weeks, but generally, like, likely you just weren't getting in the amount of energy, like the amount of nutrition you needed daily. and it just starts to take its toll after some time, and you just start to feel brutal, right? So I think that's the important thing, is just don't be too proud, right? It's like, it's great to try things. If it works for you, it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, right? So it's kind of schedule based big time, I think.
A couple things I learned when I was doing the intermittent fasting consistently for a little stretch, it's kind of touch on what you said, is it made me a little bit more hypersensitive to food.
Yeah.
So like I could taste salt, sugar, fats. It would come a little bit more to the forefront. Mm-hmm. So then it would turn me off to foods that are not necessarily good for me. But then also at times when I was training quite a bit, when I would force myself to get into that window, then I would overeat with the crappy stuff, because I would eat like whatever I was supposed to eat, that I had planned, which is the good stuff. But then I had gone such a stretch without eating, and my activity level was high enough to where even the food that I ate wasn't enough.
Right.
So then it's like, and the way the society is, it's easy to grab a bag of chips or, whatever it may be. And then and it's just my body requesting calories because I did a lot of training. And then you end up taking shortcuts because you start eating crappy. So they said you got to kind of be careful with how you plan it, and is it going to work for you?
Absolutely. And the one thing too about that too is like the whole like under eating on calories, like you said. I think the one thing people don't kind of take into account is, like, I always tell people this, like, at some point, like, the brain's going to get what it wants, so if you're very depleted in calories, right, and you've just been under eating, say, for a couple of weeks, and you're staying that active, like, at some point the body's going to figure out what it wants, and the things that it likes are the fastest form of energy it can find, right, which is processed foods, sugary, salty foods. So that's what you end up going for, right? So I think that's another thing, is like, as those hunger hormones start to build, you eventually just hit a point where you're like, hey, you literally just reach for the first thing, and that's going to be the thing that gives you the most gratitude, which is the high sugar, high fat, high salt, right? So those are the only things you can even think about eating at that point. You know what I mean? You're not at that point, like, a salad with chicken and rice is the last thing in the world you're going to choose, right? So I think that's a big thing, is if you find, like, I found that, like, even like personally, with trying to understand that, I think we, as athletes and as active individuals and stuff, it's important that we find the threshold of how much we can eat, while still achieving our goals, rather than how little we can eat while trying to achieve our goals, right? So, I mean, man, like, it's a world of difference. I'm telling you, like, I've been in that position where at the end of the night, I'm eating bags of popcorn or pretzels or, like, whatever we have in the house, anything really, of those kind of, like, highly, like, I guess, sensory rewarding foods. But as I started to increase my intake of more nutritious, healthier foods, my weight didn't go up. I just quit snacking on that junk because I was just eating better foods, and my body was more satiated, and my brain was more satiated. And I think I'm much better off for it, right? Like, I mean, I'd rather eat 3 meals full of great nutritious foods and a good, like, hearty fourth, like a snack or whatever, all of stuff with good nutrients, rather than try to, like, skim through my day and then crush a bag of popcorn and a bag of chips at the end of the night because I'm starved, So I think that's, like, a big one that athletes in specific, or just, I mean, really anybody, just eat as much as you can possibly eat until you start seeing it negatively affect the goals you want, right? So I think that's a good way to think about things.
Yeah, I kind of, it's funny, I teach that to my son. So it's, kids have it, especially the way kids' diets are with school and all like that, they have a tendency to eat junk food. I try to teach my son that, so that when we go out to eat, it's like, okay, we're going to eat the base food, which is the foundational stuff that's actually the good food. And then, we can have pizza. Or, we can have the chips or whatever junk that he wants to have. But that's like at the very end. So in other words, it's still there. Like, you can have it, just we got to eat this first. And then just make sure you leave room for the stuff that you want. So eat this. And then what ends up happening is that he ends up eating this, and instead of having, 3-4 slices of pizza, he'll have a half a slice or a regular slice. So he still gets his fix without overeating and predominantly doing that. So that's a great way of thinking of it. I like that phrase. How much we can eat to train, not how little we can eat. I like
Yeah,
that.
I think it's just the way we've all been, especially now, like you said, social media and all this stuff. It's more so of like, how much can you diet down? How little can you eat? How little? Really should be the opposite. Man, food's great. It tastes great. You know, it's like kind of the foundation of our, you know, especially social lives and everything like that. So, man, eat as much as you can, because you're going to feel that much better until it starts going the wrong way, right? So if my current eating pattern, I over some time I start to see, okay, like I'm starting to see some changes in my body that I don't like to see. All right, well, I need to scale it back just that little bit. But at least, you know, I would rather it go that way, because I'm at least going to be fueling like the goals I have, right? I'm going to be fueling my performance and stuff, rather than, you know, just beating myself down. Because I think there is a happy medium there too, where, you know, you obviously have the amount of food where obviously you start eating a little too much, you start going a little on the high side, right? But when you get into that low side, I mean, you get into all types of issues, right? And that's just, like you said, not recovering, being tired, performance hits just goes into the toilet right away. You get running into like hormonal issues and things if you really take it too far. And it's just, you know, from like nutrient deficiencies, everything. Metabolism slows down because that will adjust itself as well, right? So, I mean, if you eat like, say, 1,200 calories a day for a month, your metabolism is naturally going to adjust itself, right? Because that's the amount of fuel it knows it's getting, and it knows it has specific processes that it needs to run in the body. So it's going to slow everything down, right? So I just think that's the thing is rather than just aiming for how little, then we got to aim for the opposite of just trying to get as much as we can, while still promoting our goals.
So I have two other ones. One of them, it's one of my vices, which is not a good thing. One of them, because I see it also a lot with a lot of the guys that train with us, is energy drinks.
Yeah.
Like I know, like I walk into it knowing that it's bad for me, but I've kind of accepted a little bit. And what I do is I try to minimize it as much as I possibly can. But at the same token, it's almost, especially if I'm training quite a bit, it's hard not to drink it, because it's like, oh man, I especially in a combative sport, in some aspects, is like there's times where I have to, like, it's like, man, I'm exhausted, but I got to go train.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then if I gotta, it's like the double-edged sword. Do I sacrifice not training in order for me able to feel right, or do I kind of train anyway and then take the negative thing of the energy drink?
Right. Yeah. Man, that's been, you know what, energy drinks have been on my list of like things that I really want to do a deep dive on for a while, because I'm in the same boat. Like I went through a time where like I was on drinking, and they're like my most hated thing that I do. Like, cause I'm the same as you, man. Like I'm like a gym junkie, fitness junkie. Like, and there's days where, you know, it's like, listen, it's either I go and grab an energy drink, and I know the fact that, like, as soon as I drink it, I know I have to go to the gym, because like I went and bought you know what I mean? So, but I mean, just there's, you know, they're just not the healthiest option, obviously. Like, I'm definitely a proponent of like caffeine, things like that, right? Like things that'll, you know, get you excited and get you ready to go. So like, I'm always like a coffee, you know, before the gym kind of guy. I just think like with energy drinks, there's just such a lack of knowledge of exactly what's going into those things and the way they're made, right? I mean, obviously like the amount of chemicals and stuff that they're putting into them is something that kind of concerns me just as personally, is like, I know that I don't want to be putting all those chemicals and artificial colors and sweeteners and, you know, whatever else they're putting in there, and these proprietary blends and all these different things. That, I mean, they've been proven. Like, I think they've even, I think there's studies that show that like they increase your blood pressure pretty substantially, right? Like just after one can or whatever of an energy drink, but they can't figure out like what it is that's doing it, but they know that energy. So that's kind of what scares me, right? It's like, you know, there's no way to know everything that's going into those things. So like I said, I'm all for getting like a performance booster if you want to go with some caffeine, whether that be like a coffee or tea or something like that. But I just, I'm just of the opinion that the less we can get dependent on those things, the better, right? So, I mean, like I said, I think like anything, nothing's going to kill you once, but those, if you do it, once, or it's a once a week thing or something like that, and like some days you got to get jacked up to train, and that might be the only way to do it, then I would say, I'm still one of those people who has performance in mind as well. But if there's any way around it, I would say find an alternative source, get something that's a little more natural, would definitely be a little bit easier on the body.
I agree 100%. It's like it's not the one cigarette that kills you. It's the 365 a year times 10 years is what kills you. So it's you just got to be mindful with it. The last one is supplements, because it goes back to what you were talking about in your presentation. Because in the jiu-jitsu world, unfortunately, it's not like a major league sport. So a lot of the athletes, obviously, to make money, they're going to get sponsored, and a lot of the sponsorships are from supplement companies. I'm the firm believer that it should be like a 95% diet and 5% should be supplement.
Yep.
Unless it's like essential stuff like say iron or B complex or fish oil, what you're talking about, the fatty oils, or branched chain amino acid, where those are like kind of core positive supplements. Other supplements, I'm not sure, So what's your opinion on supplements?
Yeah, like you said, I'm in agreement with you. I think they have a place. Very few of them do, truthfully. But some of them do, you know what I mean? But again, that's going to be for like kind of that high level athlete. Like they always say, like you can't out supplement a bad diet, right? So it's like, I think people get caught up in the fact like, oh, I'll just take these 6 powders and it doesn't matter. Like, but I mean, also they don't really, a lot of them are made kind of like synthetically in a lab, you know what I mean? So they're not the same as eating food, so even taking like a multivitamin is likely not going to digest the same as eating a nutrient rich diet, right? So I mean, obviously I'm always going to say get everything you can get from your diet, and all of these supplements, they all come from, you can get all of them in your diet, you know what I mean? So like even things that are great supplements that I recommend, like creatine, I mean, it comes high in red meat, right? So it's very possible to get these things without supplementation. So I would definitely say, like, especially the amount of money people spend on them, man, and it's just a total waste. The money side, believe me, I've been there. I've spent way too much. I'm not proud to say it, but back in my days, like I said, when I didn't know as much as I know now, I definitely spent too much money on things like that. But I guess the ones I would say definitely, I mean, fish oil is a big one. Creatine, I love, like that one's been researched a million times. It's actually got the most research done to it of any supplement out there, and it's been proven safe a million times. And it's just a 5-gram serving. So just a little scoop post workout. Really, you don't really need any load phase or anything like that. Some people will want to do that, but it's probably not necessary. And it is safe to take like year round, right? And that's just going to help you help improve like your ability to do those repeat explosive activities, which would obviously be big in your world. I'm trying to think what else. Creatine, I mean, protein, if you're not getting enough, that's fine. Carbohydrate, like for, a jiu-jitsu athlete would probably be smart to do like some kind of intra workout carbohydrate. So whether that's like Vitargo is a brand that makes a good one, or even just doing a Gatorade or something like that during your workout, to supplement a little bit of carbohydrate is going to give you some good energy. There's some decent research coming out about beetroot. So that'll actually increase like your ability to hold, like it increases your nitric oxide levels in your body. So you'll have more oxygen in the body, things like that. So that's an interesting one that I actually want to get a little more into. It's kind of, I guess you could say it's like newer on the market there, but beetroot is a good one that I think it wouldn't hurt to try, And really the only other one I can think of right now that is good for like performance wise is beta alanine. So beta alanine is one that they've recommended in terms of like boosting like your ability to like take on cardiovascular load. So give you a little bit more energy, like in a competition. And they actually recommend, like, I don't think they recommend taking it year round. The side effect of that too is, I'm sure you've taken it in like a pre-workout, it makes your skin all tingly and stuff. So some people don't like to take it. They put in a lot of pre-workouts and things like that, but it'll give you this tingling like effect all over your skin. But you can actually take that like a month. It takes about a month for that to really kind of like saturate the system. So they kind of recommend taking that like a month before any kind of competition, and then that can help, you know, in terms of just cardiovascular load during that exercise. So that might be one of those things where if you did plan out, you know, say you were going to fight 4 times a year or something like that, and you kind of periodized everything, you would maybe want to take that beta alanine like 1 month out from competition. Yeah. So that, I mean, other than that, like branch chains, right? Amino acids are a huge one that a lot of people spend a lot of money on, which is completely unnecessary if you're just eating enough protein in your diet. So, I mean, proteins are made of amino acids, right? So if you're eating enough proteins, you're getting more than enough amino acids. So that's one of those things that everybody wants to. It's crazy. Like for whatever reason, it's been proven like many times that as long as you have, like, if you're eating protein, you have these amino acids in your system, and they're there to help your body build proteins. Yeah, exactly. But yet people keep buying them, and it's crazy. So that's the one I think that.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of asked you, because I think people have to be. Like, you got to kind of fall a little bit on deaf ears when it comes to the whole supplement industry, because they're in it to make money. So you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, and kind of like you said, the only one that I'm aware of that they've actually done thousands of studies on that where actually has positive is creatine monohydrate.
Yep.
It's the only one that I know of that there's actual, like, a piece of paper that says, look, this actually had some results. Outside of that, everything else is like, oh, we don't know, we think. And then,
yeah, exactly. Everything's like need more research. That's like that beetroot is a prime example of that. That's one of those ones that they need a lot more research. You know, they've done some studies, and there's some promising results, but yeah, I don't think it's anything where, you know, and again, it's like, I don't know, is it worth like the $50 a month you're going to spend on it? Like, probably not, truthfully, you know? So.
Cool. Adam. Yeah. It was a pleasure chatting with you, bud. So
yeah,
where do these people find you, man? Are you, best place I think is Instagram, or do you have a YouTube, Facebook, what?
Yeah. So I actually just started up a YouTube. So it's just Adam Ross RD. It's Achieve Results Nutrition is my company name. So I just have like a, you know, private nutrition company that I do on the side. I do some nutrition coaching. So yeah, I mean, definitely Instagram is where I put out the majority of my stuff. I'm trying to get better on YouTube, but Instagram is just Adam_Ross_RD. And then I have a website as well. So if anybody's interested in getting a little more information about what I do, my website is arnutrition.net. So those are kind of definitely, you know, Instagram and the website are the 2 best places. And then YouTube, I'm working on getting better with. So.
Awesome. All right, guys, follow this guy. Hit him up if you have questions, if you want something specific. He's a sports nutritionist. He's an ex-athlete himself, so just keep that in mind. If you need kind of some guidance I would help you, but nutrition is not my thing. I know about it, but for me to speak about it competently is not the best thing for you. So hit this guy up either on Instagram or on his website. And then, or you can hit me up and I'll pass over your information to him, whichever it may be. I appreciate you guys watching.